We're now going to head into our first session. We're going to start with a discussion on current legal trends affecting the construction industry. To introduce our legal expert, I'd like to pass things over to Ed Pyle. Ed is the Vice President of the Scsa, and he's also a board member of the Queen City Marathon. Hi, Ed.
With me today will be Robbie McLellan, and Robbie is a counsel with MLT Aikens, and he advises a variety of public and private sector organizations on corporate governance and compliance matters. Robbie has extensive experience in the area of construction law and assists clients to plan and execute their construction projects from conception to completion. Robbie regularly advises owners and developers on the development, preparation, and administration of the procurement process and everything that entails. He helps clients with dispute resolution strategy and compiling occupational health and safety and environment programs. Robbie also has particular experience handling delicate mixed labor platforms for contractors across Canada. Please welcome Robbie McLellan. Thank you for joining us today. Robbie, over to you.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Ed. Appreciate it. I'm going to assume everything's working well and everyone can hear me. So that's great. Both Ryan and Mayor Masters are a tough act to follow. It's great timing and great messaging from Mayor Masters that, everything that she mentioned and the tone of her message is so relevant to the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Really, this is an exciting time, not only in the city of Regina, but the entire province. The amount of infrastructure spend coming our way is frankly electric and is going to create all sorts of opportunity to recruit, to execute some amazing work, and to leave a long-lasting legacy, not only in the buildings and infrastructure that we're building, but in the industry change that we're going to be undertaking in how we do things in this province, from procurement, from project delivery methodology, from safety and safety investment, and the development of, the development and evolution of our construction culture here in the provinces. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion on risks of a hot construction market, because frankly, that's what we're dealing with here. I'm sure a lot of these risks and strategies, which we're all constantly thinking about and maybe keeping you up at night, are very, very relevant. These are things that your businesses, I am sure, are thinking about as we speak. And are trying to find proactive ways to address kind of the significant work that's coming our way. It's going to be a very hot market here, which I know we're all very excited about, especially in the light of the fact that it's May and it's almost May and we're still getting snow and ice. But the hot market in itself is going to be great for this province. And now it's just a matter of how do we address these risks as an industry with subcontractors, contractors, and owners working together to try to mitigate the risks that come with the hot market, and making sure that we are building that infrastructure and building that legacy in the province in the best, most collaborative way possible. So before we get into it, I just want to extend a thank you to the Scsa and for the work that it and its members group do. I'm a former participant in construction companies' health, safety, environmental plans, and have a pretty good understanding as to the amount of detail and strategy and culture building and frankly effort that it takes to make changes in the construction industry as a whole, but most particularly when you're talking about safety and safety culture. And I understand how serious of a commitment it is for individuals and for its member organizations to make this change to benefit everybody, very much in line with Ryan's message. So thank you to this organization and thank you to its members group for that. So a bit about me. I come from a family of subcontractors, a long line of family electricians. And to date, I've spent most of my professional career actually working in-house for general contractors, getting to really involved in the business planning, the strategy, the revenue generation, and all these types of views. As such, I do have a deep-rooted respect and a great empathy for the contracting community. On the same notion, most of our clients at MLT Aikens, at least with the infrastructure construction group, are your institutional infrastructure owners and developers. So getting a really good opportunity here to have experience and get intimately familiar with both sides of the fence, and really understanding the pain points, the important leverage, and more than anything, the true values of each side of that contracting world here. So I'm going to do my best to not show any glaring bias one side or the other when we're talking about risk identification and risk management and mitigation. And we're really going to try to address things both sides here. So with that being said, so here's a brief overview of the risks that the presentation is going to highlight. So these are risks that stem from a hot construction market. And so very obviously, manpower shortage is probably the first and foremost risk that comes to everyone's mind. But we're also dealing with supply chain risk, which I'm sure everybody's feeling right now. An increase in insolvency risk for contractors, reduced appetite for stipulated pricing from a market point of view, reduced bidders on projects generally. And this isn't just an owner risk. This is very much a general contracting risk as well. A market reduced appetite here for period of price certainty and irrevocability periods. So what are we going to do when the 60, 90, 120 day ask to keep prices or submitted prices stable is no longer going to be accepted? And finally, we're likely going to start seeing a departure from typical cash flow on projects and how we adapt to these sorts of things. By no means is this an exhaustive list for the legal risks that come with a hot market. And for each one of these risks, we're going to be discussing some of the sub risks or related risks for these overarching risks, as well as risk mitigation strategies on how we try to address these risks in a fair, balanced way, maybe in a progressive way, and certainly most notably in a collaborative way. We certainly were intending to have some time left at the end of the presentation to discuss any other risks or related items which this member group and audience can come up with, and looking forward to hearing more about some of the other ideas or topics of interest. With that being said, if there are points that as we're going through that you'd like to have a deeper discussion about or have questions about, please feel free to reach out. I think in the comments chat, as well as you can leave comments on social media, which get plugged into the streaming platform, which by no means I'm an expert in, but I think there's multiple ways to interact here. So please do, if there's something that you want to explore more, if you have some insight on. So with that being said, our first risk is the very intuitive and obvious risk of manpower shortage. And we understand that this extends beyond just finding skilled tradespeople, the men and women swinging hammers or pulling wire. It also speaks to finding sufficient staffing levels for site supervision, which is critical, safety officers and administration, project management and project accounting, and the entire procurement department's estimating and things of that nature. All of these aspects of a construction firm are all going to be strained as the market becomes hot. Being able to recruit and retain is very much a live issue. And we all understand that recruiting, hiring, and training personnel is very challenging, even in the best of times, to find that right cultural fit, that right experience for your business. And that is just very much emphasized in a highly competitive market, like in a hot market. So we're going to discuss a little bit about kind of these sub risks and some ideas on what we can do to try to mitigate these. So first, speaking about some of the things that may stem from a manpower shortage, whether it be, the supervisorial kind of office staff, or maybe more notably the tradespeople. Here, well, the first thing that we're going to see is, as there's a manpower shortage, there's an increased risk of delayed projects, and that's very intuitive. And that the project staffing, if project staffing is severely reduced with the number of skilled workers, this may reduce overall productivity on projects. And that in itself may cause delays. More simply put, if the project is at the project scope and the critical path of the project is intended to have 40 plumbers and the project can only seem to staff 15, this is going to be a problem. So, this obviously in turn leads to the secondary problem of project delays, and that's the increased risk of project disputes that come with delays projects. So it may be on owner to contractor or contractor to owner type risks, or it may be between general contractors and subcontractors that we start to see this risk, this tension, and it creates all sorts of risk. Next, and very much related to manpower shortage, is the notion of reduced bidders. And that is this notion, and we're not going to speak a ton about this right now because we're going to address this a little bit later in the presentation. But we all know that reduced bidders creates a unique situation for owners and general contractors, and it causes all sorts of risk, price certainty, and contractual term certainty risk. But most notably, as it relates to manpower shortage, we understand that companies become more and more strategic about how they want to deploy their limited resources, especially if they're unable to recruit more reliably, that they're going to be really picky as to what projects that they're going to pursue. If they're successful, they're going to want to make sure that they're leveraging their limited resources for, the least amount of risk that they can take, the most amount of profit they can take, the most desirable jobs, potentially the least sophisticated or technically tricky jobs. And they're going to really want to make sure that they're just getting the best bang for their dollar. And that may result in them not taking shots at all the projects that they would otherwise be taking. So we're going to talk a little bit about that more later. Further related to manpower shortage and very much relatable, I think, to everyone in this member organization is both workmanship quality issues and most notably health and safety issues. So as the workforce becomes more and more strained and there's more and more recruitment and hiring of less skilled or less experienced workers into the workforce, we're going to see, multiple risks of, first, that the skilled workforce is going to be spread too thin, or we're going to have unskilled or green labor coming in and working where we would otherwise have a little bit more experienced apprentices working in these spaces. And that's going to cause an increased risk for deficiencies in quality issues, which then goes back to both budgetary concerns and delay concerns, as well as overall, workmanship of the building. Reputational risk is also associated with that. really directly related, again, to the work that Scsa does here is on that same notion. When you have a workforce that is either spread too thin, they're working longer hours, maybe to the point of exhaustion, or there's that new, inexperienced green workforce here, there's an obvious increased risk of safety incidences on site. Throw in the fact that you may have not as many construction safety officers that you would expect on site, or not as experienced. You also throw in maybe not as much site supervision or as experienced site supervision. All of this compounding to a much greater risk for health safety issues, exacerbated by the fact that potentially there's delays that they're facing, and there's this urgency to hurry things along. So all of this related to manpower shortage. Further, manpower shortage can also translate to increased costs. And this obviously is intuitive in that as more and more jobs become available, there's pressure upon employers to increase pay and increase pay to all levels of construction firms, and that translates to increased overhead. And so there's a necessity for not only and pressure at subcontractors, contractors level for this pressure, but also on project budgets. So owners need to be very cognizant of the rising cost and potential asks from contracting, subcontracting community that comes with that hot market, due to the fact that labor just isn't as cheap as it once was. And again, that relates to that retention of personnel. And so, again, from a contracting, subcontracting point of view, it's very challenging to maintain that level of personnel retention. These are people that you need to retain for the sake of projects and for business viability. But if all of a sudden a firm across the street is offering another $10 or $20 an hour, it's going to be very challenging to retain personnel. And so there's going to have to be, again, that adjustment of what's the right way to handle this in the markets and things of that nature. From an owner point of view, this is also incredibly relevant because of the risk of, we all understand that when you lose key personnel to a project, the information legacy that those individuals have is so significant to project dispute resolution on projects, creativity and problem solving on projects, that owners and developers of infrastructure projects really want to see the same superintendents and project management and QA QC personnel all throughout the length of projects to ensure the consistency and reliability of delivery. Kind of our last two related to kind of sub-risks related to manpower shortage. Again, speaking to the integrity of contractors' labor strategy. And so this is maintaining contractors' preferred labor strategy and structure throughout this boom in the industry and ensuring a harmonious labor environment. This is a real risk to contractors and subcontractors that have a business plan and want to maintain their business plan. And this can be a significant risk to those organizations. And then finally, Ryan touched upon this international recruitment and immigration issues, where due to that demand and the necessity to find skilled labor, international recruitments can become more and more prevalent. And that comes with a host of issues, from kind of trade certification, custom, what is done in trades in Canada, most particularly in Saskatchewan, from a cultural point of view, and an all host of other immigration and tax matters that can be very complicated. And that's speaking to a personnel level, but we're also going to start seeing very similar and on the same token, potentially the necessity to see more and more extra provincial or international contractors and firms working within the province. And that, owners are going to have to be very concerned about and manage properly because of those immigration, certification matters, tax matters, and things of this nature. So really what we're trying to do here is identify these types of risks, most notably related to manpower shortage. And now to talk a little bit about some risk mitigation strategies that come with those types of risk that are prevalent. So from a delayed projects point of view, as it relates to manpower shortage, here's some suggestions that are collaborative, both for owner benefit and contractor, subcontractor benefit here. One is it's always best to plan ahead, and that's going to be a very much a reoccurring trend here. And I know many of our professional contractors, subcontractor community, they're very, very good at planning ahead. But to develop detailed manpower curves, projections here for the critical path of the project early on, to ensure that there's clear understanding of the staffing requirements, so that recruitment efforts and joint recruitment efforts, not only just upon subcontractors that are executing the work, but with the assistance of general contractors or project owners assisting with those recruitment efforts, so that we can get the staff that we know we need well in advance to ensure the success of the project. The last minute recruitment in the market just simply isn't going to work. Further on that effort, and is this notion of an increased pre-qualification efforts that may need to be considered by both owners and general contractors to recognize what is going on, and to ensure that the subcontractors of the business that are having the emphasis on bringing tradespeople to site, that they are understanding the commitment that they're needing from a staffing requirements. And what this pre-qualification may need to start thinking about is their evaluation of the size of the current workforce within the subcontracting, potential subcontracting partners, and looking at the pipeline of work that they have secured or may looking to secure, and understand, is there a real risk in engaging this subcontractor, or are they going to be are they going to be spread too thin? And there may be some real issues there. So there may be some pre-qualification efforts that we may not have otherwise seen. The other thing, and this is just the reality of where we're living in, is projects may need to consider like a prolonged schedule. They may need to carry extra contingency for the kind of this hot market of which we're seeing. I know owners, especially owners of revenue generating facilities, are very, very tight on their timelines, or for a public procurement point of view, there's political promises made. But at the end of the day, by pushing an unrealistic critical path, we're not setting that project up for success. We're just setting ourselves up to emphasize some of these risks that we've already identified, and really trying to find what's the right timeline for the project, not in any market, but in this market at this point in time where manpower shortage is a real thing. Related to reduced bidders, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation. But, one thing that contractors, owners may want to think about is potentially breaking traditional trade scope packages into smaller packages, so that, mid-size mechanical, electrical, drywall firms, whoever, may not be able to execute the entire scope of a $500 million project, but they certainly can do portions of it. And this way we're creating, a situation where we have more bidders on more packages because of the smaller, more, the smaller size of it, and the more firms that are actually able to chase that work, opposed to kind of mega bundling of projects. And that may just allow a better opportunity for collaboration between competing businesses that they may not have gone through an official partnership consortium JV to execute a large scope of work. But if we break it up, then potentially they are working alongside one another without that official consortium. So it's allowing, the market to create partnerships indirectly. So just as a suggestion on how we deal with that type of situation. Moving on to the workmanship quality issues and health and safety issues. Both of these are very much related to one another with the same root problem of having inexperienced personnel on a job, as well as potentially having a spread force that's spread too thin. And so from a QA, QC point of view, we really want to work with all contractors to develop a true robust QA, QC program, which will identify workmanship issues in an early, timely way so that there isn't this huge disruption to go back and fix deficiencies, do remediation work in a very disruptive way. So to have this robust plan and investment of resources into it is going to reap benefits throughout the life cycle of a project. What we also want to do is potentially talk about now from a budgeting and an owner point of view is to build in very transparent contingencies for rework and deficiency cleanup so that there isn't as much of a tension point of view, but really a clear understanding as to how this deficiency work is going to get addressed in light of the manpower shortage and hot market, to create a little bit more, we could say, balanced sharing of that deficiency risk between contractors and owners. The other thing that we may want to do is, and very much related to a past point, is develop a project schedule which has room for rework and deficiencies on critical path. So two things that we're going to see there is we're not seeing that same type of time pressure that's causing tradespeople to really execute work as fast as they possibly can, thereby creating a better opportunity for workmanship. So there's ability to slow down and do things properly, but there's also the ability to handle this deficiency, build in this QA testing, review assessments, and so that we aren't creating a lengthy punch list item at the end of a project to go back and fix things, but we're fixing it in real time without significant pressures. And that only works if really, contractors, subcontractors are staffing to the level that they need and not just using that contingency time as breathing room, by staffing less than that they would have otherwise staffed. And so, it's a collaborative effort to really kind of see a cost sharing or a risk sharing here. From an HSE point of view, it's very similarly, it's up to owners, contractors, subcontractors to really develop a robust, comprehensive safety program for projects and really emphasize the safety culture of the project. Similarly, we want to develop a schedule that has room for inspections and training and the proper safety protocols in place, and that there isn't that hurry up and rush kind of pressure that often we see as a root cause for health safety issues is, we're just working too fast or we didn't have the time to set up equipment properly. So this is something that we really want to ensure that we are being realistic with our schedule so we're not creating, emphasizing and making a problem worse. One of the other things that owners, I'm starting to see a trend amongst owners, particularly even in the province, is making health and safety initiatives reimbursable. So instead of having them as a line item within a budget that is a stipulated cost that may sometimes get reduced to make a more competitive price, is we relieve the contractors from that opportunity to kind of cut back on health safety spending for a competitive price, but really make it truly reimbursable. And that way we're seeing a combined commitment from owners to really emphasize health safety. So it could be PPE, it could be other equipment, it could be training, it could be other resources that are cost-based resources, potentially even rates of construction safety personnel to ensure that there is enough on site to create this culture, right? And this safety culture is a combined effort and responsibility of everybody on the project site, including the owner, from a budgetary point of view. So, that's another potential option and mitigation strategy here. And I think more than anything, what we know we need to see is a commitment from, again, everyone on that project in both time, effort, detail, and funds to make a proactive, safe culture on the site, more so than our traditional reactive kind of punishment or reprimand based culture. We want to create a safety culture that is proactive and progressive for the benefit of everyone on site, especially when we're dealing with inexperienced green labor, and to make them and to mentor these men and women into executing safe work. Kind of the last slide, talking about risk mitigation strategies for this notion, is again increased costs here, and this is really both a combined effort between construction managers and owners, and that's to ensure that, and frankly engineers, engineer consultants as well, is to ensure that project budgets are properly calibrated for current market conditions, and not importing dated assumptions. If a project is budgeting and they've done their budgeting efforts and exploratory efforts in 2019, 2020, we know that those are no longer accurate. And so, current efforts need to be taken to ensure that, the hot market and the impacts of the hot market are properly being considered in project budgets. One kind of maybe contentious thing to say, and potentially clients getting upset at me for saying, is potentially some sort of reasonable introduction of escalation provisions within contracts for long-term projects. And this is one way to talk about this increased cost, the retention of personnel to ensure key personnel remain on projects, is this escalation, and really to understand that in a hot market, unforeseen contractual costs can spike, and it's to find what is the fair sharing of that market risk, in a way to both protect project budgets, but also in a way to ensure fair treatment of those within the construction pyramid here. And that goes along side by side. And I will say, when we talk about escalation provisions, there has to be a quid pro quo there, and to find the right balance as to, if owners are going to agree to an escalation, whether it be tied to an indice or some type of inflation metric, that, there has to be a necessity for open book assumptions on costing, contingencies, rates, compensation, all these types of things, so that there's more transparency and trust built between owners and contractors and subcontractors, to ensure that, if we're getting treated, if we want to create a situation where we're all treated fairly, this is how we go about doing it, right? Is more transparency, more contractual reasonability, and that's going to be a trend for the rest of this presentation. From a retention point of view, one risk mitigation strategy that we may want to talk about is bonus structures for key personnel remaining through the retention throughout the entire duration of the project, and retaining that talent. So, and that may be a contractual negotiation that owners are going to have to start considering, and contractors may have to start pushing, is if it's so imperative that we keep the superintendent or this project manager, is there opportunity for a retention bonus because of the immense importance of retaining talent through project life cycle. So just some suggestions. I'm not going to address much from a labor and immigration situations, as both of those really require some very specialized and expert advice to deal with. I will note that if any of these are real risks or real interests of any of the attendees, I welcome you to reach out to me, and I can point you in the right direction for some very specialized trained talent and advisors that deal with immigration issues and the complications of immigration issues, extra provincial and international tax related concerns, and from a labor strategy point of view. There's some very, very delicate advisory that needs to be done on that as well. So if it's an interest to you, I don't think I can do it justice by rattling off a couple bullet points in this presentation, and would suggest a more in-depth conversation with the right people. So moving on to our kind of secondary overarching risk here is supply chain risk, which I think is very intuitive to everyone here. This is projects not being able to order and receive materials and equipment in the way that they need to for timely and reliable completion on the critical path of projects. And I know this is something that we're all feeling right now. I ordered a fridge in August of last year. I still don't have it. And that may be annoying to me, but when it comes to like $1 billion infrastructure project, it could be absolutely detrimental to the critical path of that project if the equipment that's ordered, or the long lead items that have been ordered, or even the commodity-based materials, steel materials or whatever, don't show up when they're supposed to show up. And they don't show up a week later, but they show up 6 months later. Supply chain risk is very, very front of mind for the Canadian industry. And this is something that is going to really take a collaborative effort to really address the risks associated with it. And, kind of our best suggestion from a legal contractual point of view is teamwork here. And it's the collaboration and identification of early within that design development phase to seek opportunities to pre-order as much of that key equipment, key material, or commodity-based inputs that are being identified as high-risk items, and get ordering those soon. Get those ordering now. Even if it's prior to contract award, even if that means we have to either de-scope from your prime contractor or your subcontracts, and you have to maybe assign it back in later in a reasonable situation, or you just carry that risk outside of those major engagements. Is if you're really needing to deal with the supply chain risk, this is probably your best opportunity, is to really have your experts, your subtrade experts, your scope experts identify what part of the projects are really at risk from this global supply chain catastrophe that we're living, and get early on it. The other things that owners are really going to have to be more cognizant of is being willing and open to accept alternatives. If the supply chain will not accommodate your delivery, then is there other alternatives that are going to be able to fill that role, and to be a little bit more nimble and agile in your decision making. And that comes with also a budget impact, is to make sure that there is budget contingencies for supply chain risk. And that may be, again, a transparent contingency that's accessible to contractors, subcontractors, for supply chain risk, from an alternative point of view, from an expedition point of view, from any of these different things that may make a mitigation of the supply chain risk a little less impactful. So the next kind of third risk here, which is the increase in insolvency risk for contractors, I understand is a bit counterintuitive to a hot market, right? We're seeing contracting firms that are busier than they've ever been. They're doing profitable jobs. There are lots of revenue coming in. How could there possibly be an increased insolvency risk for contractors? But the true nature of it is we see greater insolvencies and bankruptcies and kind of closing of doors of contractors in hot markets than we do in kind of stable, kind of steady state markets. And this was seen from 2010 to 2014 for sure. And this is primarily has to do with the overextension of firms. They're really testing their resources, and most notably their cash flow and their credit lines. And as soon as the liquidity of a firm is completely evaporated, they're one late payment away from missing payroll or not being able to pay some significant bills, and that is your first step into business failure. The other thing that we know that hot markets do is there's a lot of opportunity out there, and so we see entrepreneurial people starting up construction firms in hot markets that I don't want to call them fly-by-nights, but sometimes they're fly-by-nights. And someone with a truck now hangs a shingle that they are a contractor, and not every startup, not every new venture fails, but some of them do. And these people win work. These people get engaged on not only kind of small renovation projects, but sometimes major infrastructure projects that they're just not ready for. And we're seeing failure and shutting doors of those types of businesses as well. So really what we need to understand is, the increase in insolvency risk across all trades is certainly impacted by those startups. And so when we want to talk about a little bit about this increased insolvency risk and what those kind of directly translates to here, is that contractors. So the first kind of thing, great. Sorry, I'm glad someone has chimed in. I appreciate it. This is fantastic. Is storage for those materials on company shops? That's very, very good point. We're actually going to address that a little bit later. But I agree, that is a real risk. Where to put them, where to put it securely, who's going to take responsibility for that type of stuff. And that's going to be a collaborative effort between subcontractors, contractors, and owners. So we're going to come back to that. But thank you for chiming in, Charlotte. That is a real risk. And that's something that projects need to be thinking a little bit more proactively, is if we're going to be hedging our bets and ordering things early, we need something, if they do come early or they are going to show up somewhere, we need to have a plan in place for that. And we need to make sure that there's adequate and fair compensation and risk sharing of those materials that are going to just be sitting there from a warranty point of view and otherwise. To get back to this notion, is this contractors taking on more projects than they should. And so again, our biggest advice, and we're going to get to that, is watch your cash flow. If we're spreading too thin and our credit line is maxed and our credits with suppliers are maxed, that you truly can be one payment, one late payment, one denied payment away from not being able to pay your critical bills. So there's a lot of profitable work out there, but to make sure that you're chasing the good opportunities that you have and not all opportunities, and be very strategic with that. And really, when we talk about contractors spreading themselves too thin, we talk about the financial resources and financial assets, but it also speaks back to that personnel issue is, if you are taking on more work than you have the workforce to commit to, you're drastically increasing your risk for project default and contractual default. And that in itself ropes you into a host of legal liability, for extended costs and damages liability, as well as reputational risk of, yeah, I failed on this job, and you don't want to have to deal with that. So, that's part of the reason that we're seeing this increased insolvency risk for contractors, is this spreading. You're trying to, get at it while the market's good. Try to make as much money as possible, and that can be a dangerous game. The other increased insolvency risk that we see, or sub-risk here, is the necessity for more different forms of contract security. So as there's an increased risk for insolvency, owners, developers, and even general contractors may require more or different forms of contract security from contractors to subcontracting firms because of that increased risk. And so, this causes all sorts of issues, in that sometimes businesses may not be able to get more bonding. They may not be able to get or put forward letters of credit or significant parent company guarantees without, and thereby they may not qualify for some of those jobs that have that elevated necessity for different forms of contract security. So, it creates risk that in itself, that if owners want to have elevated increased contract security, there's going to be a budgetary impact to that, and there's going to be potential weaning of bidders as a result of that. So, it's a quid pro quo there as well. Also related to increased insolvency risk here is, and similar to our past points, is in these periods of construction boom, we actually see an increased insurance and bonding costs, because again, there's that increased risk of default and quality issues and damage and loss. We're going to see an increased risk generally across the industry, and thereby your insurance companies and your bonding companies, they may start charging more. And, that's a direct overhead cost to construction firms, and thereby it's going to be an increased cost of projects. We also, again, related there too, is reduced bonding capabilities. So there may be an ask for more bonding, and there may be a greater cost to bonding, but bonding and surety companies may overall reduce bonding caps to contracting firms if they're seeing a greater increase of insolvency risk for those individual firms. And they may not be willing to underwrite that risk. They may not grant the bond's necessity to execute that work, and thereby disqualify subcontractors or contractors from pursuing work. So, all of this is really much related to that root cause of everything's becoming more expensive, and everything is at a greater risk in that hot market. So from a risk mitigation strategy, you're going to speak first to owner risk and then to contractor risk mitigation strategies here. So again, very similar to what we've mentioned before, from an owner's point of view, to develop those robust pre-qualification requirements to address financials and the different corporations' current work and future work prospects, to ensure that if they're signing up to do work on your project, that they're not signed up to do 44 other projects, and there's just no way that they're going to be able to do all this work. To ensure a comprehensive contract security program is placed that is markedly reasonable, but to be very transparent about what their expectations for that security is. Make sure that's included in the RFP. It's implemented at contract award, and strictly adhered to that. They're choosing the right security that they feel they need in this market, and they're being very transparent about it. And both of those points can really relate to general contracting as well. And here's, from a project management point of view, this is very critical, and this is to react to any early signs of contractors, subcontractors struggling, which may signal credit risks, insurance, and to really react to these situations where, if you're seeing contractors, subcontractors really starting to struggle, there's pressure from their downwards subcontractors or suppliers, and there's pressure there to react to that and try to find ways to help that contractor or subcontractor out to get through the project and to be successful. And the most damaging thing to any type of project is a subcontractor or contractor default and replacement. It's often better to really try to find a way to let them along, get through the project, and try to help them be successful. We also want to, from an owner point of view, is to really manage the overbuild situation. I know contractors often really try to get as much in an overbuild situation as possible, obviously, and that's very market norm. But from an owner point of view, with an increased risk of insolvency, being an overbuild, that's and a contractor goes down, that's money that's never going to be recovered. So, that's going to be a situation where you really want to make sure that contractors are paid. They're paid at the right progress payment and not be in an overbuild situation. And frankly, you don't want them in an underbuild situation, because that's going to just make the risk of insolvency even greater. So ensuring that you have that. The last thing that we really want to emphasize here, or one of the last things that we really want to emphasize here, is ensure transparency in payment. So make sure that subcontractors have the ability to seek information from owners as to how much has been paid, what has been paid for. The prompt pay regime is really going, is meant to solve this issue, but to have direct lines of communication and transparent lines of communication is really going to help create a collaborative culture of that project, and to have a clear understanding as to when payments are being made, when they aren't being made, and why. And lastly, from an owner point of view, is strict adherence to the Builders Lien Act requirements, especially the holdback requirements here. Is sometimes owners aren't as careful with their builder's lien holdback retention and releases and things of that nature. And in a situation where insolvency could be a real situation, we really want to ensure that we're strictly adhering to that to avoid those double jeopardy payments. From a contractor's point of view, overarching kind of risk mitigation advice here is to be very strategic with your opportunities, right? Is you only have so much liquidity, you only have so much credit line and so much cash flow and financing. And so you really wanted to deploy those efforts as strategic as possible, and to not be overextending yourself to the point that you have created a very fragile organization. You really want to be resilient, and creating resilience means that you're being fiscally responsible and you're not overextending yourself here. To ensure that all your banking, insurance, and surety facilities are all negotiated to your most market favorable terms that you can possibly get. And that's engaging your experts to help with that, whether it be lawyers or insurance brokers or your other experts that are very familiar with this, your accounting firms, to really assist and ensuring that you get those facilities negotiated as best as possible. And this is going to be the overarching thing, is watch your cash flow. Organizations that are big, major organizations that we've seen, and failures of significant billion-dollar contractors go down. They were working really, they were good operators. They were working great. They had a ton of projects. They had a ton of profitable projects. They just ran out of money. They just ran out of cash. They had lots of opportunity, and that's what often takes down businesses in a hot market, is make sure you remain liquid, make sure you watch your cash flow. And again, what we want to do is ensure that transparency of how much and what for owners have paid for, to ensure that cash flow is being managed appropriately. The final risks are a little bit quicker, so hopefully we can make sure that we finish on time here. So the a market reduced appetite for stipulated pricing. So I've attended all sorts of market construction industry conferences over the last little while, and this is a very, very resounding sentiment from the contracting industry, primarily the general contracting industry, but we're seeing this from major subcontractors on major projects. Is there's just a reduced appetite for stipulated pricing. What comes with lump sum pricing is all sorts of risk, market risk, that is so hard to measure, so hard to price at this point in time, because commodity pricing is spiking and changing daily. You're not being able to lock in any type of long-term pricing from suppliers, from your go-to subcontractors for that very risk, and there's just this reduced appetite for stipulated pricing, which is very much an owner point of view risk, but also a general contracting point of view risk. Is if we can't get reliable stipulated pricing from subcontractors, how can you plug in that to your own stipulated pricing? So, we're seeing this market sentiment right now. So from a risk mitigation strategy on how to deal with this changing landscape of stipulated pricing and essentially awarding projects to kind of the lowest stipulated price, I mean, the best advice that can be made on this is a listen to the market. Right? Owners need to market test the viability of their projects under the proposed project delivery model. And if the market is telling you, we're not doing this is we're not going to bid, this is just not going to work in this climate, in this location, or whatever it is, owners need to listen. And they need to understand that, okay, that's not how this is going to work out. So we need to take a different approach. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about collaborative contracting, more progressive models on how to deal with these things. But, we understand that sometimes owners, most particularly public owners, aren't as quick to adapt. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And we as an industry need to help these public owners as best as we can to adapt quicker than they otherwise would adapt. Pilot projects, and really good collaboration from the contracting community, opposed to opportunistic collaboration where we're going to make owners regret going with a construction management model versus a stipulated price model, and budgets get blown. That kind of leaves the bad taste in their mouths, and we really have to set up projects for success. So risk 5 is reduced bidders on projects generally. And I think this is, again, that notion on that's very intuitive, that there's going to be just less bidders bidding on every project because people are already, or firms already have as much work as they can take on, or they're going to be more choosy about the projects they want to take on from a budget point of view, from a project delivery point of view, from a risk transfer point of view. In attending some of those Canada-wide panels, we've seen this impacting very significantly in Ontario and BC. Infrastructure BC had mentioned that they have had multiple jobs, and I'm talking like $1 billion hospital job where they got zero bidders. No one wanted to work on that hospital. Or another risk is they had one bidder, and then all of a sudden, the project needs to pivot its delivery model to ensure that they're getting, treated fairly, and price accountability and everything from that public procurement owners receive from voter bases. And this isn't just owner risk. We've also heard of Ontario jobs that have had, they've had a general contractor step in, whether it be as a construction manager or truly as a general contractor. And they've been, again, $1 billion hospital. And that particular project couldn't get a single bid from any electrical contractor. no contractor was willing to give them a price to do that work because of its location, because of its budget, because of its schedule. And frankly, they just weren't able to staff it in the remote location that it was. And you know, the story that I heard is that major general contractor phoned up every contractor that they could electrical contractor that they could think of, and they, despite having really good relationships, couldn't get an electrical contractor to do the work. And so major disruption there. You know, and so what we need to do is find a way to adapt and mitigate that risk. And so we understand that when it comes with reduced bidders, we're seeing a. Sorry, Kelly, am I running out of time? Is this my? Okay, all right. I will. I guess just very quickly, kind of talk a little bit about. So when we talk about reduced bidders, we're talking about, you know, less competition, thereby having increased project costs, and less competition. Obviously, you have less ability to negotiate beneficial contractual risks, or risk transfer and terms here. We may also see that public procurement projects get canceled or pivoting of a project delivery methodology. And we also see that same type of risk for transfer to general contractors. From a risk mitigation strategy on this, what we really want to talk about here is ensuring that timing of projects is well considered by owners. You know, if projects can be delayed to ensure that they're not cannibalizing one another, to make sure that you're releasing these projects in a very timely, strategic way. You're market testing your delivery models, and you're doing early project investigation, scheduling, budgeting to ensure that project parameters are tuned to this current market. Another thing that owners really want to do is think about what qualitative things that they can do to make their projects more attractive, whether it be travel allowances, best-in-class accommodations, best-in-class catering, top-notch internet even. These sorts of things that can really make, especially remote projects, more attractive to contractors to be willing to try to staff out-of-town projects outside of major urban centers. Is how can we make this project execution more attractive to the personnel that would be executing the work, and make them more willing to live out of town. The other thing, bundling projects from a public procurement point of view, is maybe have, you know, a really attractive project paired with a less attractive project, right? And where, you know, you're going to get lots of bidders for this project, but maybe none for this. Well, bundle them together, and that carrot of that really attractive project may be enough to incentivize contractors for doing both. I think speaking, obviously, reduced period of price certainty and irrevocability, we understand that this is an issue in the market. I think most notably, the thing that we want to talk about here is that owners need to develop quicker evaluation metrics and do as much work in negotiation during the RFP process to ensure that that time between submission and award is reduced as possible. So that may be having a prolonged RFP period where you do your negotiation and your technical evaluations and things of that nature prior to price submittal. And obviously the corresponding response there is contractors have to be willing to accept what has been negotiated prior, and, you know, not try to renegotiate post-award, as we all know general contractors love to try to do. And frankly, what we also may need to do is create a period or create contract methodology where it's a hybrid model. We fix the prices that we can fix in the market conditions, and then we have to fix post-award or fix later on a contingency basis when it becomes more the project becomes more advanced, and we're able to fix things later on. And that creates obviously budget risk for owners, but if that's what has to be done, that has to be done. And that's the hybrid model. Again, for departure from cash flow. And this is really what we're talking about, is this more front end investment to reduce commodity inflation. So this is hedging and buying product, buying material, buying equipment earlier on in the project, so to underline that. And obviously the risk mitigation strategy here, as currently or previously addressed, is to ensure that we're seeking commercially reasonable opportunity to address the risk of installation and everything with this pre-ordered, pre-designed stuff, but also providing prepayment for early ordered project and inputs to ensure that there's a level of security corresponding, and to ensure that there's reliable and secure storage for housing for these pre-ordered items. And that's a collaborative effort between owners, contractors, and general subcontractors. So I think with that being said, my apologies. I guess I got too excited about this topic and put too much content in here. But my overarching principle here and overarching message is in a hot market, things can't be done the way that they've always been done. There's a lot of rhetoric that has been floating around these days about the necessity for owner change to be more focused on collaborative contracts and progressive contracts, and have more qualitative focused procurement and evaluation versus just about the lowest price. And I think that is very, very true. There needs to be better collaboration between subcontractors, general contractors, and owners. And better collaboration may appear as very risk transfer, but also may result in newer, different project delivery methodologies. And it's not all about owners here. And I think that's kind of the message here, is, with owners taking on greater risk, primarily the budgetary and schedule risk, all participants within the construction period must be willing to change, not just the owners. And we're going to need to see that contractors are going to need to be willing to be more open and transparent about their pricing, their contingencies, their hidden profit centers, which we all know exist, and their true cost centers. And it's through this type of transparency that we're going to keep getting an emphasis of more of these IPD-like principles built into our different services contracts, which is going to create a more progressive, trust nurturing environment within our industry. And again, that's our overarching principle. So my apologies for running late. I hope you've enjoyed thinking about some of these things, and I'm always available to, if anyone wants to ever reach out to me, feel free to send me an email, feel free to give me a phone call, and I'm happy to discuss any of this with anyone. It's a passion of mine and certainly an interest of mine.